You're listening to a Pop House Network podcast for developers by developers.
Hello and welcome to the Stack Podcast, episode number 53. We're recording on October 22nd, 2021. I am your host, Kito Man, and I'm here with my awesome co-hosts, Josh Juno, Daniel Hinojosa, and Ian Hlavitz. Hey, guys.
Good. It's almost like you forgot our names there.
Well, I was trying to decide how to proceed.
I'm here with my co-hosts.
I forgot who are the co-hosts.
Who are you guys again?
Yes. So why don't we talk for a minute, and then we also have a special guest as well. Yes. Josh, what have you been up to? You actually weren't at the last recording, so it's been 2 months since we've talked to you about.
Yes, I've missed it. Sorry about that.
It's all good. It's all good.
Been busy now. Lots of busy times with school going on, and kids in soccer and things like that. So various activities going back and forth, but all is good. It's much better and more active than it was a year ago, which is good. So keeping busy.
Very nice.
Just so everyone knows, I'll introduce what I do. I guess I'm a Java EE and Jakarta EE developer and DBA by day. I'm an author and open source contributor by night.
All right. Dano, how have you been doing?
Good. Kind of good. Yeah, mostly good. It's probably professionally, it's been like one of the hardest 2 or 3 months, but I'll push through. I'll make it through.
It's just hard in a good way, or just
hard? Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's some like you can take some bad, take some good, and take some bad. Take them both in there. You have the facts of life. But I think for the most part, it's just been busy week after busy week after busy week, and no space. And I think I'm just a little cranky just because I have to work usually through weekends. So I'm hoping for some kind of space here and there for some relief. But other than that, doing pretty good. Doing what I love. So
what technologies have you been teaching lately?
Actually, Java has been like really, really, really paying the bills cool. as of late. Yeah. So Scala, not so much where it used to. Kubernetes has probably become more of my meal ticket as well. So
gotcha.
So pretty good there.
All right, Ian, how have you been?
Hey, I've been good. Just busy writing code, really, just as much as I can, and really enjoying it, and just doing some pretty heavy duty refactoring right now, and thinking a lot about our last podcast with Mark and the two authors, Neil and Mark, and definitely would love to touch on some points they made this week. They gave us a lot of food for thought, like talking about years worth of stuff to think about. So anyway, but especially the discussion we had around dependencies, transitive dependency management, that kind of thing, and whether or not if we really solved that problem. But to step back for a minute, I'm good. Just like I said, busy working and writing lots of code, refactoring stuff, and learning. So things are good.
Nice. So in the last month or so, I don't know, I guess we've all been kind of busy. I've also had some personal stuff going on with my daughter. So that's been very, very time consuming. But I am still focusing on some work with a legacy project with Dano. Dano made fun of me for using soap, but it's not my fault. So that's been fun. And also I've been working on that project. I'm working with Baki Schultz, who's the super JSF guru, who's all over Stack Overflow. So it's been really great working with him. He's a really, really bright guy. So other than that, just continuing along with trying to decide what sort of things I want to focus on next, and all that kind of fun stuff. So it's my story.
All right.
I'd like to take a moment to introduce our special guest. And I'd like to introduce Richard. It says Richard, it's Fitchner, right? I just realized I know I'm going to botch your name in the middle of the podcast. It's just awful.
That's totally fine.
Fitchner.
It's hard to pronounce.
Yeah, well, for Americans, not for
right.
Germans. Anyway, so welcome, Richard. We're very happy to have you on the podcast. I met Richard a few years ago at a Code One conference. We did a session together about productivity and remote work and all that kind of fun stuff before remote work was hip and required. So very glad to have you on the podcast, Richard. Why don't you take a minute and tell us about yourself?
Thank you, Kito. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here. And actually, the talk we had at Code One was in the year 2019, late 2019, so a very good time for pandemic. And I'm a Java developer, been in the business with Java for almost 20 years now. Today I work as CEO of XDEV Software. I'm recognized as an Oracle groundbreaker, have founded a Java user group here in Bavaria, in Germany. And also I'm the co-organizer of the JCon Java Community Conference here in Germany, which went international with the COVID pandemic. We did it last year and this year, all online, and this opened up a whole new audience for us, which was really, really great.
All right.
Awesome.
Groovy.
So so we've got a few topics here. So we're going to do this sort of a hybrid. We've got a few specific topics to cover. We're not going to do a lot of news things. So we'll probably start by picking Richard's brain with some interesting questions about the work that he's done. And then we've got some other things to talk about, including the new MacBook Pros, because, we're Mac guys, most of us. Anyway.
Yeah. Josh, are you a Mac person?
I am. Yep.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
For some reason, I thought you weren't. And Richard?
No, I'm not.
You're not a Mac person.
I remember
Linux or Windows?
when we met to do our presentation thinking, this guy doesn't have a Mac.
What do you use, Richard?
It's a Windows system, actually.
It's a what kind of? Oh, Windows. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
All right.
Gotcha.
All right.
We won't judge.
Do you use WSL? Just out of curiosity, then?
Yeah, of course. Of course.
Yeah.
All right.
To me, that was like one of the most brilliant moves they made was putting that in there. It's like, wow, it's really smart.
So how does Docker? I'm just gonna let's ask Richard Windows question. So how does like Docker work on Windows? Does it go through WSL? Is that the way that works, or does it have its own technology that works with Windows?
I'm not totally sure how it works today, but it worked before WSL, and support is getting better and better, which is great. But it was a few years ago. It was a real pain working with Docker on Windows. So,
right, yeah, I know they were making strides, and I think Microsoft had to reach out their hand as well. So it was never, Docker's coming to Windows. Windows had to make that possible. From what I understand, but I don't know the technical details of what transpired in order for that to work.
Gotcha. Interesting.
Yeah. And I think on our last podcast, I thought we were talking about Docker as well, and some of the tough times that they were going through, but then they have a new kind of pay for use kind of program in order so that way they can do better work on creating better Docker clients. Well, I know on Mac sometimes there's a little bit of a suffering with it, but hopefully I bid them well because I totally rely on Docker more and more now that I'm using things like TestContainers, which I should put on the pick list. But TestContainers is
awesome.
Yeah, TestContainers are great.
Yeah, we use that extensively before and on another project. But what was I going to say?
Have you guys worked with Red Hat OpenShift at all? They have the code-ready containers. It's just as an alternative.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, I love Docker too, but if you have restrictions for whatever reason, let's say you work in an environment where Docker is not supported, right? What are your options? Because I mean, Red Hat definitely has pushed back on Docker a little bit, right? And starting from Red Hat 8, they've removed some of the middleware that Docker requires to be installed on it, right? Not only that, they've introduced their own replacement tools for like Builda, image building, and Podman for the pulling images and so on. And you can run your containers without Docker. You can still do containers without Docker, just to put that out there. I mean, I love Docker, believe me. I run it too, so I use it. But just curious, if you guys have worked with the OpenShift CRC, it's called Code Ready Containers. Isn't
that based on Podman, or am I mistaken?
Yeah, no, you can you can use the Docker command line interface to push your images into an OpenShift cluster as well. You can anytime you're building or managing images, you can use Docker, right, as a tool, or you can use Podman and Builda, which is the Red Hat kind of encouraged way for security reasons too. Like their mantra is no more big fat daemons, even though obviously systemd is the big fat daemon on Red Hat and on Linux, right? But Red Hat wants to control the big fat daemon, so that's why Docker kind of was competing with that technology in a way. So they've kind of optimized, and it runs as root, right? If you're running Docker on a VM, it's running as root. I'm sorry, it's got to run as root because it's doing all kinds of networking, bridging networks, and managing firewall rules, and it needs privileges to bind to ports and so on. But what's fascinating is, OpenShift, you can run it locally with no privileges. You can, it's a really cool way of doing Kubernetes and Docker that Red Hat has put out there. And just curious, wondering if you guys had any.
Yeah, I have not worked with it, but I will say that if I look at the investments they put in a Docker desktop, it's gotten a lot better. Like, I think it's free for personal use, but if I'm on a project, I have no problems paying for it. Because, and this is just the desktop subscription or whatever that they have now, but it's really nice. Like, it really lets you sort of look at, all your containers. You can do maintenance. Like, I was having space issues, and I was able to see all of the containers I had, all the images I had, which ones were being used, all that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, definitely. The barrier to entry with containers using Docker Desktop is much lower than just about any other tool. But it's a good starting point. But I'm just saying, where do you go from there? Docker is just the intro to containers, really, right? Then you want to orchestrate them. You got to. Docker used to have a product in that space. They sold it off, right? Obviously, Docker Swarm didn't win the race, right? Kubernetes definitely became the de facto tool. So orchestration is outside of Docker too, but no, containers. That's why I think more in terms of containers than Docker, because Docker is like an implementation of containers in a way, right? Yeah, it was the first one, and Docker Desktop makes it super easy to get up and running with that. But what is its value proposition today? Like there are other tools available. It depends on what you're doing. If you're working in a Red Hat environment, OpenShift might be a better option. If you're working in a bare metal environment, you could use OpenStack, Ansible, and deploy your cluster. There's a tool called kubespray, which is a Ansible playbook for deploying a Kubernetes cluster, and it uses Docker under the hood. But no, just food for thought. Did we lose Kito? Kito.
I think once you said kubespray, then he was out of there, man.
Hey, I didn't name that thing, man.
I know you didn't, but every time I hear it, I can't stop laughing. Man. So disgusting.
I realized my kids have invaded the basement, so I had to close the door.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
The house smells. Did you spray some coop spray?
That's about right.
Nice. So I'd like to ask Richard a question. So Richard, the JCon conference just ended like a couple weeks ago, right? So I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about JCon and sort of what your experience has been organizing it and all that kind of fun stuff.
Yeah, of course. So JCon is a conference that we co-organize. We had our own conference called XDEV since 2011, and we merged with JCon to have a bigger audience. At XDEV we only had mainly our own products and own speakers. It was like a company conference. But we merged that, and with the JCon, we moved to cinemas, where we would rent out the cinema and do the conference there, which was really great because we could show a lot more code in a really, really good fashion. And the last 2 years, we had JCon online, as said before. which gave us a very international audience. We run it as a community conference, which means that if you are a member of a Java user group, it's free to attend. And if you're not, it's also not expensive. A ticket goes for about 100 euros. And you can join a 4-day conference with 160 sessions, workshops. We had, 140 speakers or so. Through the book, great people from all over the Java community. And it was a great experience this year to have so many great talks. And it was still a good experience, even though we were right on the edge to going back to a more in-person event or virtual hybrid event. But it was a great experience being in the mix and having so much people talk and have that conference buzz, at least what you can get from a virtual thing.
So XDEV, that's the name of your company, right?
Yeah, right.
And what's the focus of XDEV?
Great question.
Yeah.
So we started out almost 20 years ago, and we were building tools to develop websites with Java. So this was the area with the browser wars, and you had all these Flash websites and all that stuff. And we came up with the idea that you could have a website that was a Java applet, which was nice because it was the same in every browser, so you don't have to optimize for browsers. So that worked for a few years, and then we noticed,
applets. That's awesome.
back early 2000s, right?
Yep.
And then we noticed we had to change something because people don't like applets, because the plugins in the browsers, they got scarce. And so we switched to an HTML rendering technique where we would optimize for what you see is what you get experience. So the tool was called XPage Internet Studio, which would allow you to do something like Keynote or PowerPoint style, no code website development. And it would optimize for Netscape, Navigator, later on Firefox, Chrome, Internet Explorer. And it would do all these little tweaks because they did not standardize on the rendering like most of they do today. And so this was a good selling point. And we had about 250,000 installations for that tool. And that's where we started, and then we realized with the customer inquiries and feature requests that they wanted to have like a development environment. And so we started building development environments based on Java for Java. And then we did a product called XDEV IDE, which is still out there. We still maintain it. It runs with Windows 11, which is great because it's old. And this was basically a Swing GUI builder, UI builder, which had the same approach. You do, so what you see is what you get, UI builder, and then you can map your events and code your Java code. That's basically what we did. And the last step we did is, as we saw that Swing has a problem with running on mobile devices, we took our knowledge that we gathered from all this UI building stuff and rapid application development things and brought all this to Eclipse and built Eclipse plugins. So we have an Eclipse IDE, which has a lot of plugins from us, which helps you build cross-platform applications. And what we use is, in the backend, we use JPA for data access. And also we use Vaadin, which is a framework that allows you to code in Java. You don't have to do all the JavaScript stuff. It's a really nice framework. I think everybody knows Vaadin. And that was a perfect fit for us because we always wanted to do like everything in Java, everything type safe. And we have a lot of tools around that. So this is the focus of the company. And all the things we do are open source. So you can go ahead, check it out, go to our website or go to rapidclipse.com, download the IDE with all the plugins. We have a framework also that is used in the runtime, which consists of some parts that we did and, of course, some JPA implementation.
That's cool. Yeah, I'm just looking at some of these products now. It's kind of cool to see a Swing GUI builder. So All right, so that sort of sets the stage. So this was the company, and then you guys had your own conference built around those products, and then you're like, hey, we want to increase the base of the conference, and you start working with JCon, right? And JCon is like all sorts of, basically just a core like Java conference, right? Like everything Java, basically.
Yeah. And we try to focus on like more core topics. This is the feedback we get. We do surveys with our participants, and they say they want to hear core topics and topics with practical use. So they want to see use cases or things, best practices, but what people do with the tools. Of course, there's always some bleeding edge stuff going on where frameworks are presented or new versions are shown, but we want to focus on the best practice stuff.
Cool. Okay. So I guess I had just a random conference organizer question, because I've never organized a conference. I just go to them. Actually, I lied. I did work on some conferences way back in the day with Jay Zimmerman from No Fluff Just Stuff.
What was it called? JSF?
It was JSF 1, and then Sun contacted us and complained, so we changed it to JSF Summit. So they're like, that sounds too much like Java 1.
Oh, come on. It's funny, they didn't like complain about JSF, but they complained about the 1.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
But I will say Jay Zimmerman did the hard part of that, which was the logistics part. I dealt with the content and the speakers.
All right.
But I guess with all the online stuff, what I've been looking at, as the geek part of me is like, what platform do they use and how is it working? So I've seen like Hopin, which I like, and there's one other one I've seen a couple times. I forgot the name of. I mean, there's a couple more I've seen. So how did you guys pick the platform for the conference? Or did you just do Zoom?
Yeah, we had a lot of discussions how to do it, and we wanted to implement some conference system ourselves with Java, but in the end we decided to go with Zoom in a combination with other tools, and we integrated them together with AWS Lambdas.
Oh, really?
So
you did get to write some custom code.
Yeah. We made that happen, right? But we stuck together some products that were out there. There was a really good session planning tool called Shed,
okay,
which is hilarious, I think.
I think I have seen that one before. Okay.
Yeah, and we hooked that all together, and we used Zoom because we did that last year, and we found that most people get along very well with Zoom, even though Zoom is not so widespread in Europe, but everybody knows it, and you have less support to do when you use a tool that everybody knows how to use.
Cool. So what was I going to say? Zoom.
I was just going to mention, if I could jump in on the topic, that the JChampions Conf uses Streamyard. And I found that to be a pretty nice one.
Maybe that's the other one I've seen. So I noticed some of them handle, because I attended a couple of sessions at TPAC, which is a W3C conference, and I forgot which one they use, but it does more of the scheduling stuff, and the conference, the actual meetings are in Zoom. And then there's the ones that try and do like an all-inclusive, like have the video and everything, and so cool. All right. So
there's one more thing to the technical aspect of Zoom.
Yeah.
We used it in a way that participants could interact with the speakers in real time. Which I think some conferences do it in a way where they do rendering and then they stream it, and you lose about 30 seconds. And for me as a speaker, this is always a headache, because when I ask a question or when people try to reach out to me, they have to wait for at least 30 seconds or something, which is the streaming delay, and this kills all interaction. And so we try to make it so that people can really interact with the speaker, which gives this a nice touch, which I miss dearly in all the online conferences. Definitely.
Yeah, that's a good thing to have, the live interaction. That definitely makes it seem like more of a, person to person rather than just talking to someone who's a world away,
Yeah. I've noticed that the ConnectTech people, Vince and Pratik, they also one of their conferences, a couple of them I've been to, where they had you record the session up front, but then you have to be available to answer questions during the session. So it's, on the one hand, it's kind of a pain. So I'm like, oh man, I got to record this session now, But like, it's kind of nice because you're just letting your video go. You're not stressed about the video, and then you can interact more with questions along the way. So I thought that was an interesting take too.
I believe that's how the jconf.dev was last year. It was all recorded beforehand.
Yeah. So that guess that's their strategy. So cool. So I guess I had the other question I had. So when I met you, Richard, you were working at XDEV, and then later on we were chatting about probably getting things done or something. You're like, hey, now I'm CEO. I'm too busy to chat. And so I was always like, wow. So I've got a question. I've never been a CEO before. I mean, other than my own little tiny company with a handful of consultants. But so I guess my question is, what is that transition like? How big is the company? What has that been like for you? Do you ever get to actually write any code anymore, etc.?
Yeah, that's really the biggest transition. So we're a small company. We're only 30 people, so the transition was not that big. Being CEO from project manager, but it's basically you don't write as much as code as you like. So I write code when I'm off work and for things I like, and for the business part, I usually only view code and mentor people. And for now, it's I have enough experience to still do that. But I see that if this keeps up in a year or two, I won't be able to mentor people on coding because everything is moving. Especially Java is moving, and if you don't use like the new language features, you kind of get out of the step.
Yeah, I can see that. I know. There was a one gig I was on where I realized I didn't use like enough of the streaming APIs because I'd be working, I'm reviewing someone's code, and then it'd be like to use all these APIs. I'm like, I didn't know it could do that. And I was like, okay, I need to pay more attention. I didn't know you could do that with optional. Okay, so and I think it's even harder now because with 17 and I've been stuck. Most clients, 8, 9, 10, well, basically 8 or 11, it seems to be what I end up with. So a lot of these newer features I haven't really had a chance to play with. This brings up a question. So Danno, I know you get to play with new features because you got to teach them, but but Ian and Josh, do you guys what versions of the JDK do you get to use for actual development these days?
Well, go ahead, Josh.
I just was going to mention, for me, I basically mostly doing Java EE and Jakarta EE, so still on 8 in production.
Right.
But just put in a ticket recently to move to 11, so we are not going to jump to 17 because really, I feel more comfortable going production with containers that are stable, and so there aren't too many that are really stable on 17 yet. So since I'm a Payara user, we're going to go with 11. So I'm kind of moving to 11.
Cool. Now you can start using var. Woohoo!
I know. I'm excited.
What about you, Ian?
Nice. Yeah, I'm still on 8 actually, and I don't use it as much as I used to. I used to do a lot more Java coding than I do right now. I've moved a lot more into the web front end space, HTML, TypeScript, CSS, really focusing on Angular development and TypeScript. And I love it. You can build as complex applications in TypeScript and Angular as you can with Java and your favorite web framework. So, and it's amazing the innovation that's going on in that space now with the reactive programming, with Redux, with the evolution of TypeScript too. I mean, the language is really maturing, and it's exciting to watch it mature, and all the new language features that get introduced and how they can save time, like the nullable coalescing operator. It's like, finally we can just put question mark dot everywhere and don't have to do my if else statements all the time or my ternary operator
love to see
stuff
that in Java.
Yeah, it's fun. Programming is programming. I really enjoy it, whatever language I happen to be using. And I do write some API. Mostly when I do Java nowadays, it's more fine tuning, JPA queries, or some basic REST related logic in a API endpoint or something, JAX-RS stuff. I don't do, but I used to do a lot of JSF, and all the heavy lifting of the UI was written in Java, and I wrote tools as well. I used to build tools for doing the same thing, Richard, like you've kind of described with your RapidClipse. I used to build plugins for Dreamweaver to enable JSF development, visual WYSIWYG environment kind of thing. And I still like those tools and like that approach, and I think it makes a lot of sense. So for certain projects, for certain developers. So, but yeah, things have changed a lot, right? In the last few years now, front-end frameworks really took off, and you have React and Angular and Vue, and we still have the component-based architecture, which is the best thing about JSF. I thought was, widgets, pick and choose your whichever ones you want, build your application, assemble your UI, and test the heck out of it, right? And customize it for the users, or let the user customize it. Depends on what you're building, right? But the same idea works today. So whether you're using Java or TypeScript or other languages, but a few years ago, Kito, you pointed out rightly. You said we were talking about JavaScript and Angular, and we agreed Angular is cool, but you said, but JavaScript, man. And I thought, like, what's wrong with JavaScript? And you said, like, it's just such a terrible language. And I wanted to understand your point of view, and I gave it some thought, and it's just too dynamic. I think that's really the problem. We all like type safety. We're all used to that, right? So you don't want to give up type safety, and it's a discipline. You can't just teach someone type safety overnight. It's like dynamic typing is anyone can do it, right? But once you start introducing types, the complexity goes up a lot, but the confidence goes up too. So that's why I'm happy today. We have type safety around JavaScript with TypeScript in particular. And you can still build complex applications without worrying, oh my gosh, is the thing going to blow up? Is there some hidden bug that I'm not aware of because of the dynamic typing, right?
Yeah. And I agree. Like I like TypeScript a lot. I worked on it exclusively for a couple of years. And also, you know what I think of as the best example of TypeScript success? VS Code.
Yes.
It's like VS Code written in TypeScript works great. Nice.
Definitely. Yeah, it's a beautiful IDE for sure. I mean, Danno knows I'm a JetBrains guy now, through and through. But yeah, I've used VS Code a little bit, and it's cool. There's really, like, I like these products because there's such a thriving ecosystem out there of third-party add-ons you can install and customize. The thing with VS Code is a little bit too much overlap. I think the plugin community there's like 3 or 4 implementations of the same plugin. It's like, how am I supposed to pick one now? You know what? I'm going to go based on number of installs, or you pick some trivial metric and you're like, this one has the most stars. Okay, I'll try this one, and hopefully it's the right one. But maybe there's no wrong choice.
But yeah, I mean, and it is a great IDE, and I use it it's probably my second favorite. I'm still on IntelliJ across the board, but like I've been on projects where we just standardize on, I like to standardize on IDEs on projects if I can. So
Yeah, it makes life easier.
Sure. Yeah. So if there's different projects where I'm just, VS Code is the best choice because it's all front end development. And I know there's actually really good Java support in VS Code now too. I was actually even looking at there's on the Java Champions mailing list, something came up about a way to do JavaScript scripting on top of a Java API for testers or something. And I was looking at GraalVM because GraalVM is very good at like polyglot development with JavaScript, and because it uses Node, it's basically like a Node backend. Having that interop with Java or R or whatever, Python. And I noticed that they have plugins for their polyglot tooling for VS Code only. I thought that was interesting, especially from Oracle. Interesting. That's the one thing I sort of wish IntelliJ would support the VS Code language service, but on the other hand, it would open up a huge can of worms, I think. So I can see why they haven't.
Right.
Oh, speaking of language services, you just reminded me of something I wanted to add to the picks. We talked about this recently, right? The AI coding assistants for your IDE, right? I don't know if you know about it. Kite. Okay, Kite, for example, is the one I was trying out.
Yeah, we talked about that. Yeah.
It supports Java, JavaScript, Python. So 3 languages, but it's pretty good. It kind of anticipates what you're typing and helps you autocomplete. It's like a little bit smarter than the built-in autocomplete, but I struggled with it. So I uninstalled Kite because also I was using other languages that it didn't support. So I started looking around. I found another one that I started using, which I really like, and it's called Tabnine. And it's actually pretty good. Like I have to say, I really like what it's done so far, and it works with any kind of it works with a lot more languages somehow, and I think it uses a language service API to connect to the syntax and get all the grammars and so on for the different languages. But out of the box, it even without enabling that feature, which is still an experimental feature and only supports a few languages, but out of the box, I was really impressed with the completions that this thing's coming up with. And it really helps you get in the flow. Like when you're writing code, you don't want to, it occurred to me, it's like writing code is almost like driving a car, or to some extent, like a race, or a sport where you want to get in a zone. You don't want to leave that zone. You're performing, you're executing, and it's, you have a time limit and you want to be efficient with that time. And it takes time to get into that mode of efficiency and thinking where you're writing your best code. And this tool, it definitely helps. It helped me think less about the typing side of coding and more about the bigger picture of what are your intentions? What are you trying to do? How are you refactoring this class? Like where should you move this code? Where should you move that code? Or how do these two classes connect to each other, and so on. But yeah, Tabnine, I highly recommend it. And they're pretty serious about privacy too. They know like that's one of the biggest concerns developers have. You don't want to be sending your code up to some cloud server, and like they're very clear. There's a local learning model. It never leaves your workstation. You can enable a team cloud account if you want, but even then, it's only minimal information that's shared. But that way, your team can share the same coding model. So the completions are kind of propagated throughout the team. So it's an interesting use of AI, right? I think it's a very useful way to use AI to help you get your job done faster, right?
Right. I should mention just also that the GitHub Copilot, which is I think similar conceptually at least, that is, I think it's under technical preview. So I just got my invite. So nice. Hopefully I'll get a chance to try that one out as well. So that I must admit I'm scared of AI because I was happy that it wasn't taking over my job yet. But
no, I think there's a big gap between what an AI coding assistant can do and a fully trained human programmer.
I totally agree. That's the way it is right now. Yes.
There's this theme, though, to be fair, right, has come up over the years, like 4GL, right? This concept of fourth generation languages that a business analyst can sit down and assemble a complex application by typing in a few nouns and verbs, basically, right? That high level abstraction of doing the hard work of writing code and building software, right? That idea is not new. And today it's just reincarnated. New form is like the no code platforms, right? Or zero coding tools. I'm not that familiar with it because, well, I like coding, so I don't look for alternatives to coding. But for people, for business analysts, or who's the audience though of a no code solution today? That's
I was just thinking about that because actually I've been someone I've worked with before brought that up recently, and then I don't know if anyone remembers Max Katz, but he was an evangelist for XDEV back in the day when they were doing JSF stuff.
Yeah.
He's in that space now, low code, no code. He just started working for Okta, so we should try and get him on because I'm curious to get his perspective on that space because XDEV had a tool which was sort of a low code, no code tool for building mobile UIs. So I think that's how he got into that space. So I'm curious, Richard, I know your tool isn't necessarily a no code tool, but it is like for basically avoiding boring coding, right?
Yeah, totally. So you're right. We see a lot of use for that, and Ian, I can totally understand your question, but we see a lot of people using that, and it's not only business analysts. I can give a very good example where we were surprised what people do with our tools. So basically, in XDEV IDE, a few years back, you could do a no-code approach. So you would only drag and drop, and you could code, but you didn't have to if you were satisfied with the option we gave you with the options. So one time we came to a customer and they called us in for a consulting case where they had a problem with the software, and they didn't tell us what they did. They just said, okay, we need a guy on site and we want to talk about it. So it was a production company. They did packaging for yogurts and chips and all that stuff. Really big company, and they had a big problem because they had to render the images for the machines that print all these packaging materials. And there was a guy that was not affiliated with anything with coding or informatic or computer science or something like that. This was a production engineer, and he just was not able to really code, but he had an understanding what must be done. And so he found a way to distribute all the information to different PCs and Macs that were in this building, and they would render this stuff and send it back. So really, really simple algorithm. And he did this with XDEV IDE and saved a lot of money for the company. So there's a very good example for me for like such a low code approach to do something with people that just know the business problems.
That's interesting. And, it's funny because I'm going to take a closer look at the space too, because, this always comes back every few years. There's like low code, no code, 4GL, there's some other name for it. And because I worked for a few years with a company that was in the Lotus Notes space. And that was a lot of what that was about too, is, you could build some little app and you didn't have to be a coder. And they would, you could fill out it. Maybe it's just you fill out a form, store it in a database, and then you can see a list of all the entries in the form and then edit it, a lot of crud sort of things. But that was a lot of what that space was about. And a lot of the work that we did was just surfacing all these notes apps random people had written. So you run into that issue too, where it's like, because it's just sort of done ad hoc, there's no overall view of what people are building. And I think that's probably an area where the newer tools are much better because we're sort of cloud, with all the cloud stuff now, whatever people build, they can at least be better linked and organized. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, if you're making low code tools, I can see the benefit. Like you're selling it. It's like that's your product. You're looking for customers, you want to make money. That makes sense. I mean, but if you're well, if you're not selling it, if you're looking at it as, let's say, that's what I mean. Who's the audience? If you're a manager trying to control cost and you can't hire a team of programmers for whatever reason, maybe we can't find the right people, or it's requires more domain knowledge than a typical programmer would have in your domain, or you can't afford it, right? Or for whatever reason, there's no budget for hiring a team. I can see some benefit. That's a cost-saving tool. But I mean, I've worked in environments where there was a legacy application that was built with the kind of 4GL type of tool, and it generated like 2 decades of maintenance work for like a large team. And that's not saving money. You know, there was guys going in there under the hood, working on it and trying to migrate it because they were stuck, and it was not dry. It was not dry at all.
I think that's what happened with a lot of the Node stuff. And that's what I saw when I was working with that company. So I think you know, we'll see. I think we should probably devote a whole episode to this. But I think we'll find. I'm hoping that this time around the vendors have at least a better idea about how to manage the tech debt aspect, because I think that's a real issue. But it doesn't matter for everything. You know, I imagine there are small departments where someone throws together something that's not like super scalable, but works for like, you know, the 6 people in the department. As long as like there's an IT view where someone can upgrade it, see what it is, maintain it, it doesn't really matter. But if it becomes an actual, like, you know, profit center or like, you know, a massively important app, that's when like the scalability issues start to come up.
And not that I want to get into that low code space and help them solve their problems, because to be honest, it's obviously a threat to, you know, if you make your living writing code and there's a low code tool, it's not in my interest to help it become better. But at the same time, I could see problems coming up with that kind of approach because you know, technology evolves so fast. So you build yourself a nice low code product, right? Great. We got version 1 out, a minimum viable product out into the marketplace. Now some disruptive thing happens. You want to adapt your product to some disruptive change in the marketplace. Either a user's expecting a completely new feature that's a must-have thing now that you must have in your product. How are you going to go back and change it? Are you going to just bolt on a new feature? Or what if this disruption requires like a major rework or redesign of the existing product to accommodate it, for example, right? Like, I don't know, if you want to integrate video into a word processor, for example. Okay, well, now everything, we have to change the architecture, almost fundamentally, introduce new modeling, new data structures.
But it's not really trivial. I'm not really sure that's going to be any. I see what you're saying, but that's always like an issue that pops up even for. I guess the question is, how would you do that? Is that what you're saying? Like,
how would you do that with a low code approach? Yeah. Whereas if you have a team of 3GL, like, you know, Java programmers, and you give them in your sprint planning, you see, here's the new feature that the customer wants, guys. And we have this finely tuned team of crack programmers who can just deliver amazing products, right? And I know we could do it. I know they could do it. But if you have an end user who's trying to build his own software with the tool, I mean, maybe the audience is programmers though. Maybe it's like the AI tools, right? Maybe it's designed for, hey guys, programmers, you want to write your application faster? Use a low code tool. Or, you know, maybe it is aimed for the end user. I don't know much about it. It would be good to have Max on the call.
Yeah, we should definitely try and get him on here. So if you've got like a strong opinion on low code, no code, you can always find us at Stack Podcast on Twitter or at stackpodcast.com. We'd love to get your ideas, because I think this obviously is a space that's getting bigger. So I'm curious to see what developers think of it as well.
Ian, I just want to add something to this. I understand a lot of arguments that you made, but most of them work or work out in a good way if you do it in Java. So what we see is totally what you say. People build stuff with Lotus nodes and with Oracle forms and all that stuff, and this all goes to waste, and you have a really big maintenance problem. And those people come to us and they rewrite it with XDEV or RapidClipse, which makes it possible to have all this in Java. And we have a window of maintenance now for our XDEV projects that extends at least to 2030 with the support for Java 8. And you can run it, of course, you can run it on Java 17. So we broke a lot of those arguments and had like a middle path that enables low-code and 4GL development, but cuts a lot of the problems that you would have with other solutions.
That's great. Yeah, it looks like a really interesting product, Richard. And it kind of reminds me, Kito, do you remember Gavin King and the like the Seam framework? Back in those days, we had this tool. They wrote like a crud generator, crud app generator for Seam. I don't know if you remember that. I
don't think I remember that tool.
Seam was so badass. Like that was my gig, man.
Yeah, it was great.
That's how we met you, Danno, because you came to the JSF Summit to talk about Seam, I think.
Yeah, I was like, I was a Seam nut.
It was cool.
Was this part of the Matisse support that was in NetBeans?
I don't think it was. I don't think it was that. There's a CRUD application generator. Now it's part of the Red Hat portfolio, I guess.
I don't think I used that.
Yeah, it wasn't really a standalone product. It was more of like, hey, you can use this command line tool.
I thought Matisse was like a GUI tool, like a drag and drop GUI tool for JSF, wasn't it?
You're right. That's what that was. Yep.
Yeah.
Is that what
you could use with Seam? Yeah.
Is that what happened to Java Studio Creator, or was that a different tool?
That was a different tool.
Okay.
Yep.
I think I played
it. It was very similar, though.
And now another episode of old people talking about JSF and Seam. But it was awesome.
It's the idea of generating complex applications with a tool, right? That's the theme we're talking about.
Well, I'm telling you, like we're still going down memory lane a bit, but the reason that I got into JSF and component oriented UIs is because the first programming tool, not the first one, but the one that I cut my teeth on a lot was Delphi, which was a Windows development tool, but it was all component based, and the components were awesome. And it still exists actually, but it used to be a Borland product. And that was one of the first tools where you could, drag and drop stuff. It was like Visual Basic, but it had a real programming language, Object Pascal, underneath it. But that was one of the first tools that got me into components, because I was like, okay, I can drag and drop a component, and components have properties, methods, and events, and all these things that we take for granted in modern UI development. That was there, it had a full-fledged programming language underneath. So if you had someone that built a UI and wrote some crappy code, you could at least go underneath it and clean things up.
And that's why I agree with Richard. I agree with you on if any language can do it, it's Java that can do it, because it's true. I mean, it's such a mature language. Pascal was probably great at it in its day, right? But today, I mean, if you're going to build 4GL type applications, generate CRUD apps, Java can do it, obviously, like no question. And using Eclipse as your foundation for your IDE too is a really smart decision. So it's just one of the most stable tools out there for sure. So that's great. Yeah, interesting approach.
So moving along, Danno, did you have any questions about Europeans versus Americans for Java?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm just curious. So we have Ian Havlavitz, the España.
Well, I'm actually from Canada, but that's fine.
Yeah.
I live in Spain.
Let's just pretend. No, I'm just kidding.
Look, I haven't done a statistical survey of the programming community in this part of the world. So I'm not going to weigh in on this. Who's a better coder? Okay.
I'm not even looking for who's better. I'm looking for like some
Friends.
programming cultural differences, if there are any. And so just wanted to ask Richard, I want to start off with use of Spring. It seems like Spring might be more of an American thing than a European thing, but I'm not sure about that. What do you think as far as differences in frameworks and tools and languages?
I don't know, but I have some thoughts on that. I think in Germany we have more of a culture that is more for stable things, don't risk so much. We have a lot of customers in the Java and banking space, which is Switzerland is also an area where a lot of German companies do business, where a lot of banks are. They require very stable things. They like application servers, and they have all these things. So I think it's a little bit harder for Spring to adapt here. But we're seeing I would say equal distribution of Spring projects, and of course now with Spring Boot, it's there's always people that always did Java EE, and there are people that more on the Spring train.
Yeah, one of the things that I notice here in the States is we are still dragging on, using JDK 8. People aren't moving at all. Is that a similar thing that goes on in your area? Like JDK 8 is still a pretty predominant, because you were talking about safety and just not making drastic moves unless absolutely necessary. Is that kind of the same thing over there?
Oh, I don't think it's the same. It's totally the same thing for not making moves and staying on Java 8 or being concerned about security. Of course, there's some people that need to stay, but we see a lot of customers asking for a lot of projects asking for Java 17 because they want to have the new features. And of course, it's a little bit early for Java 17, but we saw almost everybody move to Java 11 because there were stable builds, everything just works, and there are a lot of CVE and container scanners that allow you to see if there is something wrong. And I was wondering, because I think people who use JDK 8 here, who are concerned about security, will pay for everything that they need to maintain JDK 8. And maybe that's not the same in Europe. Just hey, just go to 11. It's probably cheaper that way and more efficient, but I'm not sure. Yeah.
It seems like to me the focus that you're talking about, Richard, is more on stability and support versus fear of change. You see what I'm saying? So I think with a lot of these American, especially larger American companies, they're just afraid of change. It works, why change it? And that's a different thing than focusing on something that's supported and stable.
Yeah, and we rely on company names to save our rear ends. Like it was before, nobody gets fired for using IBM. Nobody gets fired for using Microsoft. And then now it's nobody gets fired for using JDK 8. I don't know about that last one, but there is a sensibility of just I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to change things. I'm scared, and we're going to stay where we're at.
Yeah, there's also a big. I'm sorry. I was just going to say there's also, I think, the concept of trying to advance and trying to move forward, yet moving forward and making something more productive. Moving to a different JDK for a release is not going to affect the managers or the users at all, unless you're actually providing something, beneficial to them that they can't see. Obviously what's going to happen when you move to a new Java version. So I think it's just harder to have a company spend time on something like that, unless it's actually absolutely required. Mm-hmm. At that point, it becomes a necessity, and they have to put time and effort towards it.
Yeah.
One of the metrics that I'm surprised no one latches onto is speed. Like, I don't know if you've seen some of these benchmarks, like between JDK 11 and JDK 8, or, even 17 and like 11
Very
and
true.
8.
That's a really good point. That's something we should tout more.
There is like a huge major benefit, at least upgrading to the LTS versions. But no, we don't do it. Like, as a culture here in the US, we don't do it. So yeah.
It's really good.
So I'd like to add, Josh, there's one thing that there's one benefit that helps managers that they can clearly see, that is talent acquisition. So here we see, if you want to have developers and you go to them and you tell them there's a project that uses Java 6, they won't work for you. So, or won't work for that project. If you can say we have like the top-notch, up-to-date tech stack, it's easy sell for really enthusiastic people and engaged people to work on that project, because it's much more fun. And
good point.
Even though this is older around here, because when you have kids, I entered that business 2 years ago. You want to do boring stuff and you're really satisfied with doing Java 8. That's great. But if you're young and you want to do something, maybe Java 17 is the right way to go.
Hey, I have kids and I still rather do Java 17. So.
Because you're a cool dad. That's what it is.
That's what it is. Right now, I'm just trying to stay ahead of my kids.
That's very true. Because if you were to hold up the offers and say, hey, would you like to work on Java 8 application, or would you like to write a Swift application? Most people will probably go with Swift nowadays. Most of the younger developers, right? And the people coming into the industry, because that's a new concept and a newer language, and people want to use newer things.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I just realized something. I'm on Zoom and I have a camera on. I'm looking at myself and I realized I've become the old man, because you're talking about what the kids are doing these days. I'm just nodding my head and I'm looking at myself in the camera and thinking, what's up with these kids, man?
Well, I was thinking the same thing goes. It's like if you had a front end developer and you're like, hey, I've got this Angular JS app I want you to work on, they would be like, what? But if you said, hey, I've got this cool new Angular, what is it, 8 now? Or
13 just came out, I think.
Yeah, every time I turn around, it's like 4 new versions. Or React
4 days ago,
Vue or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it true that there's no like necessarily good backwards compatibility, or is that smoothed out for Angular?
No. That's a great question, and it ties in with something I wanted to bring up that's linked to our last podcast, which is the idea of versioning, right? So, Danno, to your question, is it the jump from 8 to 12, Angular 8 to 12? So they're following semantic versioning, right? So if you guys heard of semantic versioning, semver.org is the website that describes. It's a 3-digit versioning convention where you have your major version, minor version, and patch, right? And so what does it mean if you increment the patch number? What does it mean if you increment the minor version? What does it mean if you increment the major version? So that's what semver is about. It's like semantic versioning. It means if I increment the major version, I'm breaking backwards compatibility, right?
Right.
And to some extent, yes, they are breaking that compatibility, but not in a way that will cause dramatic rewrites of your code. It's more like, for your safety, you should upgrade to this. All your dependencies should be aligned with this version of the framework, right? So if you're using like third party, like PrimeNG, for example, closely follows the Angular release versioning. So that if you're using Angular 12, you should be using the PrimeNG 12 that goes with that, and goes for all the other third party components that you're using, or even your own first party libraries that you've built against a particular version of Angular. You can declare your peer dependencies in NPM, right? And say, this library has these peer dependencies, Angular 12, this Angular compiler, Angular 12 compiler API version 12, and so on and so on. There could be multiple Angular libraries that you're linking to, right? And so that's to go back to our discussion we had last time with Neil and Mark. We talked about DLL hell. We talked about dependency injection management, not injection, dependency management, Maven. We've basically solved the problem, right? It was the case I was making, that we don't hear about that, and they raised a good point that transitive dependencies will be the end of us, basically. And so I thought about that. Transitive dependency. What does that mean? Your application depends on library A. library A depends on library B and or library C. So if library A and B are dependencies of your app and they both depend on library C, now they might depend on two different versions of library C. What do you do, right? Now you get into transitive dependency territory and trying to figure out, well, how do I resolve this? So that's where semantic versioning comes in and solves that problem, because it says, as a developer, you can say my library is willing to tolerate, patch level changes within this range, and it should still work. Or it's even more, ambitious. It'll tolerate minor version changes, because a minor version upgrade is supposed to be basically bug fixes and not supposed to break backwards compatibility. So that's why the default range qualifier in NPM is the carré symbol now, which means I'm willing to tolerate minor version increments. If you update, if you install the dependencies for this application, when you install that particular dependency, you can pull the latest minor version that's available, right? And it should still work. That's by default. That's the assumption now, is like minor version updates shouldn't break your code. So, and there's other ways too that we've solved the problem, like locked files, right? So now that you've got your dependencies installed, your app is building, you don't want to break anything, right? So you generate what's called a lock file, and you commit that in your version control. And next time somebody pulls your code and tries to install the dependencies and build your app, they'll get the exact same versions that you had, because they're locked. It's in the lock file. So there's a way to control that as well. And to the last point I wanted to make, back to what Neil and Mark were saying, is that if you, for the example we gave was, let's say you build a calendar widget. So Richard, you build tools that are component based for UI building, right? And you have a large collection of UI components, right? So let's say you introduce a new version of your date picker, and now you have 10 different development teams that are using your tool, your library of UI components. And now what's the assumption? That they're all going to upgrade right away to the latest version of your date picker, or will they go slowly? So Neil and Mark were saying these guys are going to go very slowly, download your library, install it, test it, make sure nothing broke. And yes, cautious teams should do that, right? To make sure we're not breaking anything. But with, again, semantic version, you don't have to be as careful as you think. You can, if the author, if you're getting your components from a good, reliable source, who knows what they're doing. Like, Prime and G is my favorite example, because these guys they're really good. They know what they're doing. JSF, there's tons of organizations building components who know what they're doing. Slow incremental additions of features, enhancement. They try not to break too much. Although I have to say, I've seen components break my app with JSF a number of times. The attribute names change and then it won't compile anymore. Things like that happen. So how do you communicate those changes? That's a major version change right there, an attribute name that changed. Now I can't set name on this tag anymore. I have to use label or something, right? A button. So, or it used to be value, now it's label. So things like that have impact on your application. Those changes should trigger a major version update, and you can document it.
Yeah.
So
I agree. Like SimVer SimVersion, whatever, takes care of a lot of those issues, and sort of the package lock or whatever the Yarn version is. But I think part of what Neil and Mark were talking to also was like not just your dependencies, but those dependencies, like the transitive dependency part. Yeah. And I think this is true. I think regardless of no matter what language you use, you may have issues where some libraries depending on some version of something that another library is depending on, and there's some incompatibilities. Yeah. And those are called peer dependencies. Yeah. And I think it can get a little bit more slippery when you have the ability to specify those ranges, because
it can.
Different libraries may pick different ranges, and you may have conflicts because of that. And, I actually was thinking about this because I've done a lot of front-end development with JavaScript and TypeScript. I try to do TypeScript as much as possible, and a lot of Java. And I was like, why don't we have this problem in the world of Maven as much? We still have problems with libraries using the same dependencies, right? The transit dependency problem, but we don't have the problem as much with a new version coming out and automatically screwing up your project. And the reason is because it's just really a matter of convention. Like Maven has the ability to specify ranges just like Simver does for different versions. It's just that we're just used to hard coding a specific version number. And
I've seen a lot of development teams using snapshot builds all the time. So you're building against a snapshot. You don't know.
Yeah, I usually kill that in the continuous integration process. You cannot merge that into development.
Right. And that's the key. I think you touched on it. The key point is the CI/CD pipeline. That's going to save you. That's going to tell you, did this change break anything else?
If you just use even the Maven release plugin, it'll kick that out. Like you can't release unless I guess you can turn it off. But.
Maven release plugin. That's another discussion. Interesting. No, but if you've been able to get that working, that's amazing. Kudos to you. It seems very complicated, but but CI/CD and unit testing. That's the other thing. It's like if you introduce a breaking change, but you don't communicate it properly with versioning, and it doesn't break someone else's app, that developer didn't write enough unit tests. That's what I'm thinking. You can't rely on versioning. It's a guideline. It's a guardrail. It'll help us avoid those kind of train wreck problems, but it's not the only tool, and you can't rely on it 100%. You have to have good unit testing. That's why the CI/CD pipeline triggering a dependent build process. So I changed library C. That should trigger a build for library A and B, which should trigger a build for application A, right? Which use those two libraries, and that also depend if they're on the same release branch, right? If that's a nice thing about some build systems is that you can define the build dependencies like that, but you can also have them trigger each other if they're all the code is your build plans running on the same branch, the same numbered branch for all the different components. But so a little bit of Git flow, a little bit of that's why low code. I mean, good luck, good luck, business analyst, good luck, junior, who's the audience again? I don't know, but good luck, user with no experience or training. Go in and set up a CI/CD pipeline, deliver some application.
Yeah, but I think the idea is that you wouldn't. I mean, I think Richard's tool, and Richard, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Yours is sort of in the middle. Like I'm assuming you're still a build process, etc. But I think some of these fancier tools that they're talking about now, I imagine trying to get rid of a lot of that stuff. So they, who knows how they do it? We'll have to find out.
Yeah.
All right.
I agree.
Yeah. So we're way over on, not way over, a little bit over in time. So let's move forward a little bit. I did want to talk. We had a couple announcements. I think Josh, you have this one about Payara Cloud. Is this you?
No, that wasn't mine. Okay. However, I can mention it.
Or maybe I had.
Mm-hmm. Sure, go ahead.
Well, I don't remember what I.
Boy, this is going terrible. Like all these old people talking about old frameworks, and then like, who put that note in there?
I don't know what that was.
Hey, we can start this over. Payara Cloud is now available.
Nice.
Yeah, cool. I don't remember adding this. But
that's our technical debt, right? It carries over from our previous podcast.
That's right.
Yes, indeed.
This is basically what cloud native should be. It's if you're using Payara on a server now, you should look into using the cloud, and you can look into using Payara Cloud, and that is going to allow you to utilize a very similar workflow that you are currently using with Payara on the server. So
looks similar to the micro version, but maybe.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right, cool. So you can check out the show notes, stackpodcast.com, STACD podcast.com. And another one is Microstream was recently open sourced on last month. And Richard, I thought you may be able to shed some light on this because we haven't really talked about what Microstream is or anything.
Yeah, sure. So Microstream is a new approach to do basically serialization without the broken parts. So how we ended up thinking about that, because actually Microstream was the company and the product was founded by two ex-colleagues of mine. And we were working with our products at XDEV, and we were thinking we wanted to do everything in Java and type-safe. So we solved that problem for the UI with Vardin or with Swing, which was great. We didn't have to do any like CSS or JavaScript or something like that. We had really good IDE support, autocomplete, all that stuff we like. But always when we wanted to like save data, we had to do SQL, which was a real pain. So of course there's JPA and criteria and all that stuff, but you still have to do a lot of strings. And this made us or made our customers write a lot of unit tests, which they didn't want it to do. So they wanted to have like confidence for these type of interactions. They wanted to do unit tests for that, for other stuff, but not for this simple stuff. So we came up with a framework that was called SQL Engine, which is basically, I don't know if you know jOOQ. jOOQ is a framework from Lucas Eder, which is basically a DSL domain-specific language for SQL type-safe in Java. If you haven't checked out jOOQ, you should really do it, because he did what we did, but he made a product out of it in a company, and he has a really good support for that. We still have SQL Engine, which allows you to do type-safe SQL. Also with database abstractions for, I think, 17 databases or so. The code is also in the show notes, and the code is on GitHub. You can use that in your project independently of any of our projects. But then we always found that this is not the right way to do it. You'd still have to do SQL, and you still have to have a database, and this was all wrong. So we came up with Microstream, which is basically a way to serialize your data. But of course, you can serialize your data in Java. You use an object stream, and then you write it to file, right? So that's what you do. So, but nobody does that for like real data. So what Microstream does, it uses a lot of thought to do this without you having to implement any interfaces, extend any classes or something like that. You don't have to have any annotations. You don't have to have nothing. And the way Microstream takes the data is without any mapping. So it will write a proprietary binary format to a file or to any storage you select. And this makes it really, really fast because there's no mapping. It's an JVM independent serialization. So if you serialize objects from, let's say, an IBM OpenJ9, which has a different memory model than a hotspot JVM, you can serialize with the one JVM, you can deserialize with the other JVM. That will work. So that's basically it. So it's just a fancy serializer, but with this fancy serializer comes a lot of ideas or innovation how you can do your projects, how you can store data in Java. And this is now a separate company and is now finally open source. We waited a long time to see this happen, 2 years, and now it's finally open source, and that's really great.
Yeah, I've been really sort of excited about this, and because I was thinking about actually our last podcast about the whole idea of the bounded context. So if you've got a bounded context, so you've got your microservice, and its job, is only worry about its data. This seems like a very easy way for it to manage its data, right? You don't have to worry about, object mapping, Hibernate, etc. I was on a project where we were using DynamoDB, and we still had to deal with like mappers and annotations, and we had to do all this fancy stuff in order to get like sort of seamless serialization out of it. So this sounded pretty cool to me. And I guess one of the questions I had, Richard, was like, okay, so this is clearly a very good choice for a microservice that needs to persist and read data. But what if you have like 12 instances of that microservice? Like, how do they communicate? How do they share the same data? Because it's not like, It's not a database. It's a service running somewhere. It's actually a library inside of your app, right?
Yeah. For now, you have to do this yourself. The library is only like 500K, no dependencies, which brings us back to Ian, no transitive dependencies. This is just plain old Java code in one jar file that does this stuff. And yes, this is a problem. We are working, or Microstream is working on a cluster. We do a lot of Microstream projects at XDEV because we know the technology, and so we are always talking to the guys over there, and they're working on a setup where you can have a cluster where that is solved for you. They will announce this in hopefully a few weeks, and there you will have a first step is you will have a master node or primary node that will take the writes, and you will have secondary nodes that can serve as read replicas. And the interesting part is how they restore a whole object graph. So this is not just one object you can persist or serialize. You can serialize any object graph you want, and it has to be deserialized in another JVM, and this object graph has to be updated as both JVMs run in parallel. And this is really hard, obviously, but they have a solution for that, and they are testing out the last bits to implement the final steps to do that.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, I'm looking forward to sort of seeing how it goes. Okay. Yes. Josh has to leave in 10 minutes. Thank you for letting me start, Josh. I was like, I can't read this and not talk at the same time. Okay. Cool. So yeah, so again, that's in the show notes. It's stackpodcast.com. You can check out Microstream, play with it a bit. So we're running up on time. So let's try to sort of go through some of these things quickly. So on the web, anything you want to say about Play Framework, Danno?
Yeah. The Play Framework, which is a framework that I like. Oh, so I'm on a roll, everybody. So it seems like all the web frameworks that I thoroughly enjoy just get deprecated. Like it's just very fleeting. I am a curse on web frameworks. And so, yeah. And so my website has been in Seam. It has been in raw JSF. I don't have an impressive website. It was just for my business. And then I moved over to Play Framework. I'm like, oh, this is really great. And then lo and behold, the Danno curse of web frameworks continues. And so Lightbend, who is I guess the Scala company, decided, you know what? No, we're not, they have a good memorandum on it, but I think they decided not to put, all their effort into the maintenance for it. I guess they are just going to be focused on akka and all the other akka libraries that are part of it. I don't know. I think also Lightbend as a company has gotten a little bit lighter over time. It seems like, I don't know what's going on inside. So they're looking for, more management from the open source community than within. So that's what's going on, which, begs another topic. I know we're out of time, but maybe next time. Web frameworks, are they still going to be a thing?
Yeah.
So
good topic.
Yep.
All right. Ian, did you want to talk about IE11?
Yeah, speaking of things that might not be a thing anymore.
Yeah, there we go. IE.
We have, yes, the IE11 countdown clock, death to IE11.com with a bunch of hyphens in there. But check the link in the show notes. 7 months, 22 days, 19 hours, 36 minutes, and 3 seconds until no more IE11 support.
I kind of want to put this on the wall or something.
June 15th, 2022 will be the last day of IE11's life. After that, Microsoft is officially decommissioning it, not supporting end of life, whatever you want to call it. And Angular 13 is also officially dropping IE11 support. So
nice.
Yeah, something to look forward to.
Yeah. Something to look forward to.
I still can't get over the fact that Edge uses the same render as Chrome. I still can't. It's whoever would have thought that would be the case. I mean, if you went back like 5 years, even.
I agree. Yeah. The browser wars were ferocious, but now it's like, okay, let's just throw in the towel. We're not in this business of building browser engines anymore. Let's Google do that.
They've gotten so ridiculously complicated. It's a huge barrier to entry.
It's a platform now. It's a app development platform. That's what I love. I don't think web frameworks are going away, Danno. I think there's still, if anything, they're just getting more sophisticated. But
yeah, I agree. So I have one thing to say on this. For all those people, including some that I know, are using Swing applets. That's going to all go away once IE goes away, because that's not supported anywhere else, is it?
That's a good question.
I don't know.
Chrome killed them a long time ago.
Yeah, I don't think you could anymore.
Does JavaWebStart still exist? They killed that off, didn't they?
I thought they killed that off too.
It's killed off, but I know, lots of organizations still kind of use it for their applications. And so, they're kind of stuck to using older versions of the browsers, such as IE and whatnot. So
that's not totally true. A lot of customers of our products also use our WebStart deployment option in XDEV IDE, and there is a very nice open source implementation for WebStart. It's called OpenWebStart. I'll put the link in the show notes. It's run by a company called Karakun. It's based, I think, in Germany or Switzerland, and they re-implemented the JNLP standard, so you can use this with Java 11 or 17. And the really nice thing is you can choose the JDK or JRE that will be downloaded for this client system, which is very nice if you use JavaFX, because you sometimes need a different JDK with JavaFX binaries. So this is really, really nice. So make sure to check that out.
That's great info.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, please put that in the show notes. I was just thinking about, this is what I love about open source. It's like the death of a product. A product only dies when there really is no use for it, right? So this got revived. We've seen Oracle shed Java products, to open source to see if they live, and most of them have just sort of kept on going with different maintainers because there's an actual use for the product. So that's awesome. So with JavaFX is another good example with Gluon. So cool. All right, what else do we have here? All right, so I don't want to get into this too much, but new MacBook Pros came out. We can talk about it in more detail next time. I ordered one, so maybe I'll have it by then. I don't know. I might have it by then. If we do, then we'll have a lot to talk about. So
yeah, sure, we can wait. 16 or 14 inch?
I got 16.
Nice. So you got the high power mode.
Yes, and I got.
Is yours coming in December? Is that what?
It's November. It's like mid-November, right. So it might be here in time for the next podcast. We'll see.
I need to order this week, but I'm going to go full on 10 core super duper everything.
That's what I did because I was thinking about it. If I wanted to be pragmatic, I would have gotten like the M1 Pro with like 32 gigs of RAM, and but I wasn't being pragmatic.
I do tons of programming, and I do tons of programming on Zoom. Right now, I have to cut off my video feed in order to run a unit test. And I got a MacBook Pro because at the time, this was pre-pandemic, it was really lightweight. I got a lot of battery out of it, and it was perfect for that scenario. But once the pandemic hit, then I had to do Zoom. And I'm doing the same kind of stuff. Like I'm doing everything from GraalVM to machine learning to even just simple unit testing and refactoring and all this other good stuff that Zoom and IntelliJ take everything and leave nothing for me.
Yeah.
And I'm like super in tears. So I've been waiting for, a super high powered 10 cores. That's amazing on a laptop. Yeah. And you get like 23 hours of battery life.
Oh yeah, and the power consumption is like what, a third of the Intel.
And honestly, just having like the battery life has always been like mediocre on MacBook Pros. So having one where I don't have to really worry about it sounds pretty amazing. And also nice. I've got a 2016 model, so that has the crappy keyboard. The 2017 I have, but yeah, it's 2017. The keyboard's crappy though, so a lot we can talk about there.
Keyboard gate.
Yes, indeed. All right, so yes, we will talk more about MacBook Pros next time. We've got a lot to say. So let's just move on to the picks. I think Josh, you had the first one for us.
Yeah, I was actually looking at, I haven't used, so I'll preface this with that, but I was looking at JReleaser, which looks like a nice way to streamline your Java releases.
Mm-hmm.
So
that one intrigues me because I have like a full CI/CD class that is like really taking off. I have like, from everything to Spinnaker for CD to deploying to Kubernetes. And so I'm putting an investment of time in it. But one of the ways that I go about it is I create a Debian package. And I ended up using JDEB or something like that, some sort of plugin for Maven, and it worked okay. I had to suffer though. I had to suffer a few days for it just to try to figure out how that works. And then I didn't realize, that's what JReleaser did. Like you just say, hey, this is the kind of package that I want. Go for it. I'm like, what? Why didn't I know about this before? So I'm really stoked about that project as well.
And I'm kind of psyched about like the automatic Twitter stuff. I mean, that seems like a no-brainer, but it's
like the automated announcements.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
So yeah, check it out. It's jreleaser.org. It's also in the show notes, but that sounds pretty cool. Yeah. Ian, you had a different sort of pick.
Yeah, something new this week, something different. Movie review. So recently came out on TV. Well, it was on, I think, Disney Plus. It's a movie called Free Guy with Ryan Reynolds and Taika Waititi, and it's pretty clever. So there's a bank teller, and he figures out that actually he's a non-player character in some brutal video game. And so the story is him kind of realizing, like, wait a minute, I'm intelligent, I'm an AI. I don't have to be a bank teller. I can do other things, fall in love, eat ice cream. Like he has his own free will, but he's got his routine, and he goes about his daily life. But meanwhile, the players, I don't want to spoil the film, but I'll give some key points here. All the other players are they're rooting for him. They're cheering for him because imagine you're playing a video game and some non-player characters just like acting differently and avoiding getting killed and doing like heroic things, nice guy things. So he starts to get really popular. Meanwhile, this video game company is trying to release version 2 of the game, but they can't because the players want to keep playing version 1 with this free guy because he's super popular. So there's this one scene where the CEO of the company, Taika Waititi, he said, "So how are we gonna reset this guy? AI is becoming too popular, right?" And he sits down and he says, "I got it. Reboot the server." And he reboots the server, and sure enough, the guy is reset back to normal. And like he's back to his NPC, goes to the bank, he buys his cup of coffee on the way to work. His routine is back to normal. And I just thought to myself, man, is that like how? So let me get this straight. And I think I just figured out how that worked. Okay, how do you just reboot a server and you have a character reset to normal? There's no persistent storage. His entire data is in volatile memory. Now I realize he was using Microstream. That's how he did it. It must have been.
Almost.
Oh, man.
All his data was in memory. It was in memory. So that's how they reset the character, just by rebooting the machine. Okay, now I figured it out. So thank you, Richard, for helping me make sense of that plot.
Yeah.
He should have used Microstream though, so it wouldn't happen. So
exactly,
Microstream would have persisted it. So I like it how it's reboot the server. That's cute.
The server, yeah, they That's another thing. anyway, I don't want to talk.
Yes. Yes. But I've added that to my infinite list of movies to watch, Ian. So thank you.
It's good. It's funny. It's actually pretty clever. My favorite part is I won't say too much, but there's another NPC guy. Okay. That they haven't finished. He's really like early stage alpha kind of character model, but they need to deploy him for some reason. Right. So they say, release the dude. And that's his name. And he comes out and he's this like super muscular guy, but all his dialogue is missing. So he says, greeting. And then he'll say like catchphrase, and it's super funny because they didn't put his lines in. So he just, anyway, I thought it was funny.
Yeah. Nice. All right. So did you have the next one too? Was that you? The reactive API, or is that you, Danno?
That's me. Yep.
Okay.
All right. So in IntelliJ, I don't know if you know this, but I just thought I'd let you know. I get this question a lot because I teach a lot of particularly RX Java.
Cool.
A lot of people like Project Reactor more, but anyway, who cares? All of them are very much related. But IntelliJ has a reactive API debugger. So one of the harder things is if you're using RX Java or Project Reactor, how do you debug it? And that's been, a huge problem. So IntelliJ, as part of, its, core, has a reactive API debugger. So it tells you, what stage are you in with your reactive API, and then it digs down to like the Java stack and what that means. So that way you can kind of tell the difference as to where you're at. The other one is a stream debugger, which I think I had talked about before. But if you're doing a Java stream and you hit a breakpoint and you're at that Java stream, there's something called a stream debugger that tells you here's where your stream looks like first, and then after you do a map, here's what it looks like. After you do a filter, this is what it looks like in a flat map, and it tells you each of the elements along the way. So
I did not realize.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh man,
That's
don't tell
amazing.
too many people, because like
Kito.
that's my bread and butter right there. Because I take that out during a class or whatever, and they're like,
man. That is
"Oh
gold.
my gosh, yeah, what's that?"
That's gold. It's gold.
It is gold.
Programming.
Yeah. People are like, "You're amazing. Did you develop that yourself?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, it's so awesome looking that I just take credit for it. But the other one is Dependency Manager. I mostly use Maven, but for your Maven, there's a new thing called dependencies that you could just go in and just like upgrade all your dependencies, and you could just say upgrade all, and then you're just good to go.
Oh, that's convenient.
Yep.
Okay.
And then the other one's mine as well. Just I'm sure many people know about this now, but if you haven't gotten the hint yet, TestContainers is really awesome. And I saw someone do an integration test. I thought this was really good for a DAO. Like they wanted to ensure that their database code works on multiple versions of PostgreSQL.
Oh, nice.
And so what they did as part of the code is they just listed out all the versions that they want to support and then ran it on each of those particular Postgres versions. Absolutely great. Start to use it if you haven't.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I really enjoyed that a lot. We used it on one project, a couple of projects for integration tests, and one of them it was running local stack, which is an implementation of all the AWS APIs locally, so we could test all of our AWS related or AWS specific code against the local stack, which was run in the test container. So that was pretty cool.
Let me do the last one here since I did that one as well, just really quick. If you like SDK Man and you're wondering, hey, 17 came out, why don't I see 17 on Adopt OpenJDK? I just learned this a couple of weeks ago. That's because it's under a new name called Timrin. I don't even know how it's pronounced, but that's under now an Eclipse umbrella.
Yep.
And that's where it is. So if you don't see it, go there. And that's the new house for your Adopt OpenJDK, which I'm going to miss because Adopt OpenJDK, at least for SDK Man, was all the way up to the top and I could see it right away and use it right away. But now it's like under T and I'm angry about it. I get angry about things now. I don't know if you know that.
Tragic.
Yeah, it is.
All right. I've got one last pick. So I recently, I don't really have enough time to read that much unless I'm like studying something particular to complete a task. I just don't spend a lot of time reading, which I should. But I do listen to tons of podcasts. And I recently remembered that Audible existed. So I can listen to books too. because I try and walk every day, and I'm in the car sometimes. So, and I like productivity books. And I ran across this one called Procrastinate on Purpose. It's by, where's the link? Yes, it's by Rory Vadden, who he runs some sales consulting coaching company, but it's a pretty good productivity book. A lot of it overlaps a little bit with getting things done, which is the methodology that I'm really into. And it's a little bit religious, but actually it's not really religious. It's just that Rory apparently is Christian. So if that offends you, you shouldn't read it. But if you don't care, like I'm not really religious, but it doesn't bother me the references in there. But it's actually a really good book. And there are just a lot of good points about being productive, being useful with your time, trying to maximize the time when you're working so that you can, hang out with your family and friends. And also how you can be more efficient in your personal life. And probably the biggest thing, I think when I think about getting things done, this is called GTD. I'll put a link in the show notes as well. That's more about like managing lists and keeping track of the things you need to work on, etc. There's a lot to that. But what this book has helped me think about was more about how to prioritize the things that you realize you need to do. And probably the biggest thing was to try and focus on things now that'll save you time in the future. And the programmers do that a lot, right? Like we're some menial task we're doing, and we're like, yeah, I'm just going to write some code. I'll do this, and then next time I do it, I'll just automate it, right? But you can do that with a lot of things in your life. Doesn't have to be code.
I do that now, but there's a bad side effect to it. I just get angry if I have to do it again because I want to take care of stuff that I don't have to handle in the future, because I don't want to snapping back at me. But, when someone says, oh, that didn't go through, or, there was an issue with it. Can you revisit this again? I don't handle that very well. And I'm just like, no, we got to move on. Let's keep going. So yeah, I'm bad as far as that goes. I take that to an extreme.
I can see that. Yeah. So anyway, it's just the book's in the show notes. But it's a good book to check out if you like productivity stuff. So, all right, let's blow through the events. And since we're way over time here. So, first event, JCon, October 5th through 8th. It is now over. Can we look at previous sessions, Richard?
Yeah, they're going online as we speak. Awesome. Make sure to subscribe to Twitter or the YouTube channel, and they will all come online once we're done cutting and editing the sessions.
Awesome. Okay, cool. And so they're going to be online through your own site or on YouTube or what?
They'll be on our side, but you can also find them on YouTube. So if you go to YouTube and you subscribe to the channel, you get notified when video comes on.
Okay, cool. All right, that's JCon. Also coming up, EclipseCon, October 25th through 28th, virtual. That's next week. So probably by the time this comes out, EclipseCon will be over. But I'm assuming that those will also be available. So if you go to EclipseCon 2021 or search on our show notes at stackedpodcast.com, you should be able to find those. So that has everything related to Eclipse. And that also includes Jakarta EE and 4,000 other projects. Also, the Jakarta Livestream 2021, December 7th. In the US. Are you speaking at that? Oh, wait, Josh is not here. Okay. Josh is probably speaking at that, but I don't know. And that's virtual. WJAX, November 8th through 12th. Are you going to that, Richard? That's in your hometown?
No, I'm busy, but Marcus will be at JCon Dev. That's laid up in the list and give a Microstream talk.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Okay. We're nice.
I got a funny story really quick on Jax.
Sure.
Jax tried their hand of like, and Kito, you and I were there. I think it was only one Jax event, right? In California. And that was it.
Oh, yes.
They were just trying to test the market. It was a long time ago.
Yep. I remember.
And, but they treated us really nice. Or I don't know if you remember that posh restaurant that we were treated to all the speakers, and they treated us really nice. But there was a little bit of a language barrier because a lot of them had like really, just thick German accents. I don't think they've spoken a lot of English. So they were like kind of in different place. And of course, we were, trying to communicate with them. And I was showing them, yeah, we have a lot of German culture here. And I showed them a coupon from Wiener Schnitzel. And I don't know if you know, Richard, Wiener Schnitzel is like a terrible fast food. It's nothing ethnic about, like, it's not authentic German food whatsoever. But I said that with such a serious face. I'm like, hey guys, check this out. You get like 2 hot dogs and like a Pepsi for like $2.99. I'm telling them this with all seriousness. And they're just like, oh my God. Like they thought I was serious. I loved it. Oh man.
Also, this is Wiener Schnitzel is also not German, but Austrian. So no worries there.
Yep.
Really? Oh wow. I didn't know that. That's fantastic. Things we learn doing a podcast.
I have a funny story because I've been to Germany and Austria, and I've been in Munich, and but my favorite thing is there was one conference I went to. I may have been in Munich, and I was so psyched because there was a restaurant there called Man Pizza, because Man is a very popular German name, or at least I don't know if it is now, Richard, but I think it has been in the past.
I know someone with the last name Man. Yeah.
Yeah, so I had to order food from Man Pizza. I was like, I want my pizza. So,
that's right.
Yes.
That's fantastic.
So WJAX is in Munich, Germany, or virtual. So they're doing the hybrid thing. That's November 8th through 12th. The Progressive Web Experience, another no fluff just stuff franchise, December 5th through 8th in Clearwater, Florida. And are you going to be at that one, Danno?
I am. Yeah, it's going to be my first trip on an airplane in a long time. I was over at UberConf, but I drove to Denver for that. So
gotcha.
I'm pretty nervous about an airplane flight, but I think everything will be okay.
I know what you mean. jconf.dev is December 8th through 10th in Chicago. And as Richard said, there will be a Microstream talk from Marcus there. I may be at that one. If I am there, it'll be about Java stuff. So and then our Arch is called ArchConf or ArcConf?
ArchConf, I think is what it. Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. That's December 13th. Where is that one? That's
still in Florida. Everything's in Florida.
Oh,
so it's
right.
like 1 week after the other.
Right. And that's Clearwater or virtual. Okay. So
right.
I think almost all these are hybrid, although I think JConf is not going to be hybrid from what I've seen. And then what else is there? Oh yeah, Code Mash in January. I'll be speaking of that one actually about lit element and web components. That'll be front end talk. That's in Sandusky, Ohio, and that will be in person, which I'm planning to attend. That may be my first conference if I don't go to JConf. And then in May, there's software design and development in London, UK. Woo! So,
yeah,
right.
I think we're going to see a lot of tip toes in the water and see how we can start up with conferences again.
Exactly.
So,
I mean,
we'll
my perspective on it at this point on COVID is that it's just more about learning to live with it until it dwindles to a point where it's not a concern. So,
yeah.
We'll see how these go. It sounds to me like people are being pretty smart about it. So,
mostly. That's a whole other topic.
Yes. I was talking about the conferences. The
conferences. Yeah. So I was over at UberConf and it was all vaccinated. Everyone there at the venue had to be vaccinated, but sometimes the venue is at a hotel and there's nothing you could do about the hotel. So that's what I try to do. I try to mask up when I was like not with everybody else at the venue, try to stay outside a lot more. So that seemed to work out. We'll see what happens in the future. So, like things like restrooms or whatever, I decided, am I going to wear a mask? I'll wear a mask where I'm not going to regret where I got sick. like if I had to use the men's room and I got sick there, I'm going to be like, damn it. Like, why did I get sick from there? But if I got sick hanging around you guys and just like enjoying myself or whatever, and, something's going to happen, but at least I spent my time with good friends or whatever. that's worth it. So I'll put on a mask where I feel like, hey, this part of my life's not really worth it to get sick. So I'm going to put on a mask.
I can do that. All right. So it looks like we've come to the end of another long episode of Stacked Podcast. So I just want to thank everybody for sticking around. I'm not mad at Josh for having to actually leave. So it's all good. But anyone have any last words? Richard, thanks a lot for joining us.
Yeah, Richard. Yeah, that's awesome.
Thanks, Richard.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. It was great.
Yeah, absolutely. What time is it over there? Well, you really stayed late, huh? 11?
Yeah. It's almost midnight.
Well,
that's right.
He said he was happy to do it after his kids went to bed. So,
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah. Thank you very much, Richard.
Yeah. Thanks for hanging out with us on a Friday night. We appreciate it.
I did too.
All right. Good. All right. Well, thanks everyone for listening. You can always find us at stackpodcast.com and we will talk